Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my shop. This is Peter again, and we're continuing our little video tutorial series about putting an LPR inside of a frame for a Pneumag. Okay. The next step, once you've chosen all your materials, once you've gotten all your tools, the next step is we need to prep the frame for the LPR. This is one that I've already done, but this is an old Angel frame that I haven't worked on yet too much. And you'll notice that, and this is really common with a lot of these frames, is that there's some kind of material here. This is to mount the board. Okay, so there are grip hole screws here, here, and here, but then there are holes here and here to mount a board that would be inside of this whole thing. And then you had all the electronics and that sort of thing. But we don't need that for the LPR. So basically, I want to remove, all of this material. What I'm going to use for this, there's a couple of different things you could do. You could, if you have a Dremel or a rotozip, we could make some cuts here, and then make some cuts here, and then make some cuts here, cut out most of the material that way, and then finish it up with a file to make it nice and smooth and clean. Okay. I'm a little bit careful. I'm a little bit wary about using rotozips because when you are doing this, okay, if I'm cutting with the rotozip that way, it's very easy to have it slip, to have it kind of go that way, and then you end up nicking part of the other frame. And if you're really spending a lot of time on this, if this is a marker that you want to use for a long time, I always like to be really careful and make sure I'm doing a good job. So what I would suggest instead is going to, I mentioned this before, but having a round diamond tip blade on your hacksaw, and then, this is complicated. You'll have to put this in a vise, okay? And then once it's in the vise, you're going to have to take off the hacksaw blade, thread it through the frame, and then attach the hacksaw blade again. And then we're going to use our little round file to kind of stand in for the hacksaw blade. But you would start here and then, cut down, and then start cutting that way, and then start cutting that way, and take out most of that material. And then you can use just your regular old, flat file and trim up those edges and make sure it's nice and flush, and try to remove as much of that material as possible. Okay, this is one that I've already done, and you can see, I've ground this down pretty close. Okay, so it's almost like that was never there, and I've touched up this edge so it's not sharp, but I made sure we still had the hole for mounting the screws for the grip. Okay, I made sure that this part should really be flat if you can get it that way, because once we put in, where's my LPR? Once we get the LPR in there, okay, there's not a whole lot of, we want the threads, once the LPR is screwed in the whole way, once the hole is there, we want these threads on the bottom to protrude out the bottom of the frame just a little bit. Okay. We also don't want to remove too much material, okay? There is going to be a lot of pressure going through this LPR, and so I would recommend, I don't know how much of this is here. This is more than a 1/4 inch of material, 0.3 inches, 0.32 inches, okay? So that will give us plenty of room to make those connections with the threads and keep it nice and tight. Basically, you want to go for as much material as possible, but just not enough that the LPR threads can't go through to the bottom. Okay. All right. Once we've got all this material out of the way, the next thing we have to do is we need to drill a hole in the bottom. Okay. There are a couple tools that are useful for this. Number one is having a punch. Okay. This is it's a center punch. I don't know what to call it. You can buy one for about $8 on eBay. You can get them for a little bit more at a local hardware store. But it's a spring-loading mechanism that as you punch in, as you push down, it will keep in place, and then it pops and it makes a dent in whatever it is that you're pushing into. Okay, so I've already done this here. I kind of started a spot. You push in, you're very careful about not letting it walk, and it makes a little divot in the metal. Okay, the reason you want to do this is because when you start drilling your pilot hole, especially if you don't have a drill press, okay, but even if you do have a drill press, when you start drilling your pilot hole, the drill bit kind of, as it's spinning around, sometimes it wants to wander a little bit. And so you don't want that, because it can wander enough that, your LPR is not in the center anymore. So you don't want to do that. Use the drill punch. If you don't have a center punch, what you can use is just a nail and kind of whack it with a hammer to get that little divot to start the hole. But once you have a hole in the right spot, this is, you know, obviously it's centered this way, it's centered between the two holes. I could move it a little bit forward or backward if I wanted to, but you know, that's where I'm going to put it. Once you have your hole centered, you want to drill through it. And the other thing that you want to do, again, if you have a drill press, this isn't a real big issue, but if you're doing this with, you know, a drill gun, the screwdriver, whatever you want to call it, as you start drilling in, okay, the bigger the bit you use, the more likely it is that it's going to wander out of place, okay? So if I were to use a really big bit like this, if it wanders just a little bit, suddenly I'm way over to the side, and then that's going to cause lots of problems, okay? If this bit wanders just a little bit, it's, you know, it's still bad, but it's not going to be as bad, okay? It's kind of the whole aim small, miss small mentality. So what I do, if you're using a hand-powered or a battery-powered handheld drill to do this, you want to start with the smallest bit that you've got, drill your hole, and then step it up in small increases. So you go from, you know, the 1/16 bit to the 1/8 bit, and then you go to the 7/32 bit, and you gradually make the hole bigger and bigger and bigger, and then that is going to mean that it's less likely for it to for the drill bit to wander, okay? But we're going to start simple. We're just going to go with the 1/8 drill bit, and then I'll show you what happens after we make that cut. All right, there was one other thing I forgot to mention before we drill a hole really, really big. I've gone ahead and I've drilled through with the 1/8 drill bit just to have that pilot hole. I haven't gone to the hole, you know, up to the 15/64 or whatever that you need for the 1/8 MPT. The reason I left this as a small hole first is that we need to have a spot. We need to know where to drill the top of the ASA so that we can put the LPR and have the seal go up against that. You have to be a little bit careful about this. Every ASA is a little bit different, but I know from experience that behind this, there's a this is the way CP ASAs are done. There's a little brass bonnet that you can just pull out with some pliers. Ooh, there we go. Ooh. And the rest of the ASA is pretty clear. As long as I don't go too far forward, some of the air can go through and then it can go up through the top, okay? This is different for different ASAs. Like for this one, let me see here. So this goes in this way. It goes to about there, okay? And you'll notice that there's an O-ring here, and that keeps air from going out the front where this knob is. And so basically the hole that I want to have to go through the top of the ASA so that some of the air escapes and goes up into the LPR, I can't put the ASA all the way up here because that would be in front of that O-ring. So I want to have the ASA, this is about as far forward as I want to go, okay? So pretty much in line with these side ports. Every ASA is a little bit different, so you want to pull apart the ASA and make sure you know what you're doing before you get the whole thing set up. And actually, you know what, I'm going to leave all this out because I don't want it inside when I actually go drilling through this thing, okay? But now that I have the 1/8 hole there, I know about where I want to drill the ASA, so I'm going to slide this on. Okay, so this is, it's going to go about there. Okay, I want that to be about equal. So this looks like it's about a good spot. This is something, I mean, I've done this a lot of times, but this is something you want to be really, really careful about. And I'm going to tighten this down with my little set screw just so that the ASA doesn't move. Okay, I don't want it wandering around and then I punch the wrong spots. It's really good and tight. And now I'm going to take my center punch again. I'm going to line it up in this hole. This is a little bit awkward, but let's do it more than once. Okay. There we go. So now, I know this is hard to see, but I've got a little divot right there. So now I know that that divot is the center of the groove, or the recess that I want to drill into the top of the LPR. The reason you want this all centered, okay, if this was slightly off center, if I drilled a spot here and instead of being right in the middle, it was a little bit off to the side, then when the LPR comes down, it's not going to quite hit the right spot. It's going to be off just a little bit, and then your O-ring won't seat correctly. You're going to have blowout at the sides. So by having the hole, putting the punch through there, that makes sure that the center of this hole is going to be the center of the recess that we're going to drill into here later. Okay. Now I'm going to widen this out to the width we need for the tap. Okay. So now we have our big hole in the top. That's big enough for the 1/8 NPT tap. Now this part, you got to be careful. I know the first time I did this, I started screwing through on the bottom, and that's a problem because 1/8 NPT taps are tapered. They're thinner at the top than they are at the bottom. Okay, that is so the tighter you go in, the tighter and tighter the threads become. What you need to do therefore is take your tap and you have to go in through the top like so. Okay, and it is gonna work. It's just gonna take a little bit of effort here. Now, if you have one of these, guys that you would usually attach to this, this one actually doesn't fit, but if I had one like that, this would be a problem because I'd have to, like, I don't know, once this is in here, I'd have to get this in and it wouldn't spin up at top. So what I do instead is I have, let's see here, this is a 1/4 inch, I don't know what to call this thing. It goes on like a socket wrench, and this will actually just go over the top of this, okay? And then I can put that here, and then the top of this will fit one of these giant Allen keys. And so by doing it this way, now I have a way to actually go the whole way down and get this started, okay? Once you get this started, this goes the same way as any other, tapping any other hole. You go very, very slow. You go very carefully. You make sure that it's straight. You go half a turn and then you back it out 1/4 of a turn, and you just kind of take your time and go slow. All right, I ended up changing up my setup just slightly. So I've got the tap, I've got a fitting, and then I have my Allen wrench so I can tighten it. You can see it's kind of hard to see here, but I'm not quite the whole way through with the NPT tap. I don't want to go the whole way through because then it will be too big for the LPR. I'm going to go about 3/4 of the way through and then back it out, test to see if the LPR fits, and then if it doesn't fit, I'll go a little bit further, okay? All right, so we got our threaded hole, and now we got to do a test fitting. We got to take off our fitting here. You got to be really careful when you're making your threads that you're going in straight. If I was going in at an angle, then the LPR could actually pop out one of the sides. Like right now, even though I'm pretty much in, that is pretty good. That's pretty good. If I go from this side, I can't see it on either side. Okay, it is there's not a lot of wiggle room in there, is there? Okay, and you can see that this is just popping out the bottom just a little bit. I can go a little bit tighter, but that's pretty good. Okay, you don't want to go so far that, I mean, you can go too far with the tap. If you go too far in, then even when you get to the very bottom, the LPR will still kind of wobble around. It'll be loose. And you can go not far enough with the tap where when you put it the whole way in, the LPR doesn't go through the bottom of the frame. I've done it a lot of times. Like the first time I tried this, the LPR went about that far, and then it's not popping through the bottom of the frame, and it's not going to make contact with the ASA, because with the, at least with the rail ASA, when you slide this on, this is hard to see, but there is, you can see just there's a tiny little gap, okay? And we're going to drill a recess into the top of the ASA, so that's why we want the LPR to kind of stick through just a little bit, okay? But that is pretty good, okay? I hope. Of course, we'll tighten it up with some, Teflon tape and make it all ready to go, but that's good. So the next thing we need to do is drill the ASA. So I'll show you how to do that in the next video. This one's going to be a little complicated too.